Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Many of our listeners mentioned fundraising is a topic they want to hear about. So I created a short series based on this request. There will be awesome founders in this series telling us about their stories and strategies on fundraising and other solutions for raising capital. Of course, we'll also learn from their personal growth experience. So even if you're not fundraising anytime soon, you could still learn from their growth journey. Let's dive in. Our guest today is a co-founder and CTO at Loom, one of the fastest growing startups in Silicon Valley. Recently, Loom received a $130 million Series C investment backed by Andreessen Horowitz, Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, Coto Management, General Catalyst, and Iconic Capital, bring the valuation to $1.53 billion. Loom has been rated as one of the top 10 startups on LinkedIn, and he was featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 back in 2018. His name is Vinay Hiremath. Welcome to the show, Vinay.
Thank you for having me, Grace.
Vinay, we both went to U of I. You worked at Facebook and a startup prior to founding Loom. Tell us more about your journey before founding Loom.
When I went to school, I went for material science and engineering, so a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics, a lot of math, and then I started taking computer science classes. And it really all started after building a website with like two people who were also non-technical. We just decided to teach ourselves. And when that website, which was called Secret Feed, which was essentially an anonymous secret sharing blog where people could comment on secrets, and it was about the campus, we saw that there were like 1,000 people on the site at one point.
I was on this in U of I, right?
Yeah, were you on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think everyone was on this, and then people were commenting who's sitting with who in cafeteria in Allen Hall. I'm pretty sure that was happening.
Well, we ended up having to shut it down. Unfortunately, that's really cool. I've never met somebody who actually used it.
It was like a gray website, like the color. I don't know.
Yeah, there was gray and blue, and
something like that. Yeah.
And that was just a theme that we chose because it was like a template theme from like the CMS that we were using. We had no idea what we were doing. You know, like we didn't know what a database was. We just followed a tutorial that said, hey, this is where you store your data. Like this is how you connect it to your website. And so we built this website and, you know, decommissioned it because unfortunately, one of the guys that I built it with, Tien, he was like, you know, I'm trying to like interview with like big five, like accounting firms. And he's like, they care about professionalism. And there's like secrets being posted on this website about like professors touching people and stuff. And I was like, okay, so we ended up shutting it down, unfortunately, but also I get it. But one thing that really stuck with me was the feeling of, you know, having 1,000 people on that site at once. And that was really infectious. And so I went into computer science for really the wrong reasons, which was I just liked making products. Like that isn't everything that encompasses a computer science degree. But thankfully, I found that I started liking computer science as well. And by getting into computer science, I actually mean that I just found a flaw in our classroom system that allowed me to sign up for CS classes without officially transferring in. So like by the end of when I had decided to drop out of school at the end of my second year, my material science advisor like called me into his office and he's like, yeah, so I saw that you haven't been taking material science classes for like a year and a half. Like, how did that happen? And I like told him about the hack. It was like, you know, you refresh, you like sign up. It gives you, you know, you can't sign up for data structures or whatever. You refresh the page, like click the back button, try to sign up again. And then it lets you sign up because they like did some like front end. They didn't build the system correctly. And at that time, it was already too late. I actually had decided to drop out before even starting my first internship.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You met your co-founders through a social setting. How do you figure out you want to start a company with them? What do you see as each person's core skill set, and how do you build trust before starting a company together?
Yeah, totally. On meeting co-founders and, starting a company, the way that I met my co-founders, I mean, Shahid, the first co-founder that I did meet, he was an intern at the first company that I worked at out of dropping out of college.
Facebook?
No. So Facebook is where I interned. And then I went to go work at a startup called Backplane, which did social media platforms for artists and celebrities and like brands. And, they ran Lady Gaga's littlemonsters.com. The big thing for me, like when I met Shahid, first of all, like Shahid did not like me the first time he met me because I used to be a very abrasive person. I mean, I think that if you put some things together like frat park and like, chip on my shoulder and like having to like fight the world, like that's not a great recipe for likability. So rightfully so, Shahid, like the first time he met me when he was like being interviewed, I like bumped into his interview over like a Google Hangout call. And I was just like a total asshole. And like when Shahid met me, he was like convinced that he was not going to like me, And so when I first met him, like we ended up going to work out together. I was like, hey, I'm going to like the 24-hour fitness. Like, does anybody want to come and like sign up for a pass with me? And Shahid was like, fine, like I'll go. And we got to know each other, like instantly hit it off. Like realized that actually we really liked each other. And so that's how I met Shahid. I met Joe because I was trying to scalp tickets to an electronic concert for this artist called Feed Me in San Francisco. And me and my friend Clay, we couldn't find any tickets. So we ended up just like making the game time random decision to road trip down to LA where he was playing the next day. And then to work out of the Backplane San Diego office for the next week and like surprise the team. And when we did that, as we were going down to LA, I realized that like me and Clay didn't know anybody in LA and we're like, where are we going to stay? And I hit up Adam, that guy that I was talking about from like the entrepreneurship community at U of I. And I was like, hey man, like, I know this is really random. The only other person I know is my cousin. And I would rather sleep in my car than like stay with my cousin. I love her to death, but she's like a valley girl in the truest sense of the term. And like, we just like clash a lot. And so I was like, is there any way I could sleep on your couch? Like me and my friend, I know this is a crazy ask. And he was like, yeah, sure. Like come through. He's like, whatever. Like, I don't get asked this like very often. Like, let's do it. And when we went there, we met Joe, who is his roommate, who's my other co-founder. And then like, there's a long story of us like kind of Shahid moving down to LA, me connecting them, and then me flying down frequently. And we just became like very good friends. And so to answer your question, like I never became friends with Joe and Shahid for the sake of wanting to start a company. I became friends with Joe and Shahid because like, I just really trusted them and really liked hanging out with them off the bat. There was really good chemistry. What we realized was that we also happen to have a very good distribution of skill sets to start a company. And so there was a day where we were down in LA and like, we had come back from like just a night out, like nothing crazy, but just like going to a couple bars. And we came back and we were talking and we had all kind of reached this point in our career where I'd gotten very technical at that point, or at least like what I thought was technical. And now that I've scaled Loom, I can see how far off I was. And Joe had gotten to a point where like, he had done a lot of product stuff and he was able to like do sales. And then Shahid had gotten to a point where he had designed for like Weebly and these other companies and also worked in VC and had like this really great VC network. And we're like between design, product, engineering, and like a VC network, we kind of realized we're like, we actually have an amazing distribution of skill sets to start a company, like the perfect distribution of skill sets. And so what started as us wanting to do this like weekly meeting on Sundays where it was just over like a Google Hangout of, us talking about markets that were ripe for disruption. What happened was like 10 minutes into the first meeting, Shahid was like, yeah, I had this idea about making a better user testing company. And, we're all makers, we're all doers. And so we were just like, yeah, user testing kind of sucks. We think it could be better. Let's just go do that. And we like stopped the meeting like 10 minutes in to this weekly meeting that was supposed to be a recurring thing. So that's kind of how we jumped into user testing, which eventually pivoted into what Loom is today, which is a long pivot story.
Yeah, for sure. At what point did you decide Loom is the idea you want to pursue? You mentioned you guys launched Loom multiple times on ProductCon. What was the indicator that motivated you guys to work on this product specifically?
Yeah, like we started with user testing. And it was like video recorded feedback. We pivoted in that space a lot. And we had built up like a few hypotheses around video, right? Just by naturally being in a video space. When you start a company, it's like there's multiple verticals and markets that they become your life, And so I think one of the things that a lot of people, like as they grow their startup, they become disillusioned to is we often look at like these founders who have been operating in these spaces and they're able to like predict things like 3 years out. And we're like, wow, that person's a genius. And it's like, no, they've just been working 100 hours every single week for years in the space. And so they literally know everybody that's morphing in the space. They understand like the macro trends. And so we started building up this intuition around, video and specifically how far behind video was in the workplace compared to the consumer industry, right? And like, if you look at Mary Meeker's Internet Trends Report, which if anybody's listening, should definitely check out Mary Meeker's Internet Trends Report. It's an amazing wealth of information, super digestible, very dense. But like one of the things is that, enterprise and like SaaS and B2B, like usually lags behind consumer by like 6 to 7 years. And that gap is like rapidly closing, but we definitely saw this with video. Me and my co-founders. So that was one signal. The other signal was that as we had been pivoting in this user testing space, we realized that the speed at which our video tool uploaded, which was for a totally non-technical reason, it was actually largely because we wanted to build a demo on our website since our buying persona was non-technical, and that person didn't want to wait for the video to upload and process. So we had to make it so that the video uploaded as it was recording. Because of that, we realized we generally had like this really nifty tool that would allow us to make these quick videos. And so really it was a combination of the hypothesis, us realizing that, and us needing to throw some sort of a Hail Mary because we had like 2 weeks of cash left. And all of our, like we were bootstrapping at the time and all of our credit cards had like basically been maxed out. And none of us come from like particularly wealthy families, right? So it's not like, you have 2 weeks of cash left and like your parents can, they can foot the bill for like several months. It's like, no, you have to be like sitting in a desk in an office and be getting a paycheck in 2 weeks. And so we decided to decouple the Chrome extension that was being used for user feedback from the platform. And the idea was that we were going to launch on Product Hunt. And then any of the user traffic that came through that, we were going to funnel back into the user testing platform because for whatever reason, we hadn't caught the hint that wasn't going to work out at that point, which we really should have.
Yeah. When was this?
It was about 6 to 7 months. So we had been like pivoting and working 16-hour days every single day for about 6 or 7 months.
Within the 6 or 7 months, were you guys working on this product every single day, or were you guys working somewhere else to pay the bill? What was the situation like?
That's also a great question. And so we had started like working on the user testing stuff in October of 2015. So from October to like January, we all had jobs and we were rolling off of those jobs. Shahid rolled off of his job first. And then it was myself, and then it was Joe. And so it was like kind of a cascading, like we had to wait to see what the right exit situation was. But about like, 2 or 2.5 months of that was like moonlighting on nights and weekends on top of working. And then, the rest of that time was like fully on the idea, on the project, and like just burnt, like we all lived in the same apartment. Joe moved from LA up to San Mateo in our apartment. to work and live with us. And like, you have to understand that this was at a time where he proposed to his wife at the time. So, like he just got engaged and he's like, hey, by the way, adios, like I'm going up to live with these like, and he's like a little older than us, like this 23-year-old and like 20, and, God bless Maggie for being like, okay, like go do it. Like I support you. But yeah, I mean, like it was us living together, working out together, and working together like 14, 16 hours every single day for several months.
Can you describe what does building a product look like on a daily basis? Were you guys coding nonstop? Your co-founders designing nonstop, or were you guys raising money? What does it look like in the 6 or 7 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that stage when it's just me and my co-founders, it's like everybody's really an IC, right? Like an individual contributor. Like you're coding all the time. There were frequently stints where, and this is one of the things like I've been able to train myself to do over time, but there were stints where I just locked myself in my room and I coded for like days. Like literally I would come out after like 18 hours of coding with maybe like an hour of break and then just like fall face first into my bed. And that's the approach that we took. Where like, I was coding all the time. Shahid and Joe were designing. Shahid and Joe also split the responsibilities of like fundraising, with more of it being Shahid early on because of his network, and Joe being in there as like a supporting role. Joe was doing like a lot of outbound like sales and like marketing campaigns early on with the user testing product. So you split your responsibilities, but everybody helps out. When we launched on Product Hunt, I was there like, incessantly getting my friends to like upvote our Product Hunt posts at like 1 a.m, right? Like before anything went out, because I knew that if you got into first place and you had like over 115 upvotes, by the time everybody woke up on the East Coast, your chances of being number one throughout the day was drastically better. And like the lion's share of like the visibility went to that person. And so we followed that strategy, and like I contributed to that. It's like, it really is, like you got to get this thing done. Literally what code needs to be written, what needs to be designed, what needs to be marketed, and like who are the people that should be doing that, and just like go, right? Like go as fast as possible.
Yeah. At what point did you guys start raising funding? What does a product look like back then? What does a pitch deck look like? Can you paint the picture for the audience?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a question that comes up a lot, and it's one that's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, especially if they're early on, and they don't, I think the funding market is so radically different from when we first started raising. I think that cash has become greatly commoditized now, and there's a lot of money circulating. I have a lot of thoughts on, what that will do for the market down the road. I think that the bar to get funding earlier on is lower, but I think we're going to see long lasting ramifications of, harder A rounds to raise down the road, unless you like do spectacular. I think that some tangible advice to give people though, is that you're building a product to solve a problem, but you're doing that based off of a hypothesis of how the market is set up and underserved. And so solve the problem, but also build a hypothesis. And it might be wrong. Like it might be totally wrong. And it will be. Like it will be wrong. Like over and over again, it'll be wrong. We have so many hypotheses at Loom right now about where we should go that I can guarantee you are wrong. Like they're big bets, big swings, and they're going to be like multi-million-dollar failures, because that's the stage that we're at. But like early on, you need to build a hypothesis, and you need to show how you're iterating and validating or invalidating parts of that hypothesis, and evolving it over time, and evolving your understanding of the market. And you need to do that in a way that shows a story and shows tenacity and shows output. And if you can do that, and you can marry that with a newsletter that you send out to investors, choice investors over time, even if they don't want to invest, just be like, hey, if you're even like remotely curious about our progress, I can put you on our email list. It's like no commitment, no pressure. Just give them the information of you all iterating and continuing to evolve your hypothesis. And that is like the best advice I can give early founders about trying to re-engage other VCs down the road, because they want to see the story of how you're thinking and how you're executing. And it's also, it serves as like a really good clarification device in you being like, have we made any progress? Like, what kind of progress have we made? Are we actually validating our assumptions? Because now you're putting it out there for other people who can determine whether or not you survive, because they're giving you money to tell you whether or not you're doing a good job. And so,
yeah, that's super smart. I've received other founders newsletter updates. I thought it was a super smart move to keep you and your company on top of the investor's mind. It's so impressive to see the company's progress from time A to time B.
Totally. And by the way, that's like great advice for anything you do in life. Like, if you're an engineer or a designer listening to this, and you're like in a Slack channel on a project you're working on, and you're sending constant updates about your progress and like questions to your other team members, you're going to look like a hero. Like, you're going to look way better than the person who like goes off in the corner, doesn't say a bunch, and then people are wondering what kind of work you're getting done, especially in like a remote world where people can't see you working, which is great. Like, you need to show your work. And it's so funny that it comes back to that, because that's like, at least in the US, I don't know about like in China, but in the US, like teachers are always telling you like, show your work, show your work. It's so funny how timeless that advice is.
Now we understand how you come up with the product. How do you guys plan on monetizing the product? In other words, how do you guys figure this would be a profitable business opportunity?
Sure. Yeah. It's a good question. I think that the first thing at the top is that me and my co-founders, there's two different things. One is that we, as I discussed before, like we got together because we were good friends first, with a good distribution of skill sets, which is like the exception, not the rule. I think most people, they look for co-founders based off of an idea, or like based off of wanting to like start a business, and they just haven't really either worked with these people before. I had a lot of history with my co-founders, and so that brings me to my second point, which is that we really didn't care about the idea going into this. Like, we really cared more about going on this journey together of starting something that was at least moderately successful. And so we always invested in starting a company together, thinking about starting a company. Like, we didn't go into this. We didn't really go into this when we were open test and then became Loom, as if like, Loom was like the ultimate thing. And like, we were kind of like doing it halfway. We did start by like treating it like a project and working on it. But even then, when we were starting by treating it like a project, the open test part of it, the user testing platform, we put in the amount of hours that were not on the level of it just being a project. Like, we put in basically every night, almost every waking moment of a weekend. And so the outlook was very different. And when we got to the end there, where we were running out of credit card, like all of our credit cards were maxed out, and we really had like 2 weeks of money left. The conversation that I had with my mom, who had come out to visit me, it was for my golden birthday. So, the 24th, I was born on April 24th. And she came out and just told me that like I looked really depressed, and she was wondering what was going on. And I told her that, like, Mom, like we have 2 weeks, like a week and a half left of money. We've been pivoting and working on this thing really hard for like 7 months now. It's probably not going to work out. And I told her, that being said, like, I am going to likely look for a new job with Joe and Shahid, and we're just going to get back at it. Like, we're going to get a job to pay the bills, but we're always going to be trying to start a company until something takes off. And so that was our mentality going into it. And I think it's very different from many different people. If you would say like Loom itself, like, when was it that we knew that this was the idea? When we kind of like decoupled our Chrome extension from the user testing platform and released it on Product Hunt, there were like all of these different signals. Like, first, we got any number of signups, like, at all. We were really struggling up until that point to get anybody to like buy or use our products from before. And at this point, we had like hundreds of users within launch. And so that was the first strong signal of like, okay, at least we can raise money off of this, even if we have to go back to the user testing platform. The second thing was that myself, Joe, and Shahid were doing customer support at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen so many different stories about how people were just naturally using Loom in ways that we had no idea that the product was going to be used. Like when we started out, I thought that people would maybe use it to like give people advice on their like resumes, right? Or like give them really quick overviews of like a product they're building or whatever. There was this moment where, there were many moments, but one of the moments was this gentleman from Brazil had sent me like a video, and there were a bunch of green lines on it. He asked me to repair the video. I repaired it for him, and I said, "Hey, just so you know, I have to look at the video to make sure that it's repaired. Are you okay with that?" It's like, "Yeah, sure." I looked at it. It's like his cam bubble and then like a stock ticker going down. And it was just him like screaming at the screen in Portuguese. And I had no idea what it was, but apparently like I asked him because I had to know. And he said, me and my friends, like we have a multi-billion-dollar fund. Yeah. And he was like, one of my friends made a really bad choice. And I thought your tool would be a really good tool to let him know how I felt. And, like there's so many stories like this. I don't even know if I covered that story in our last podcast, but there's honestly so many more stories like this. And it eventually became clear that based on our hypothesis from, video in the workplace, from iterating in the user testing platform and the increased traction, and honestly, the increased use cases that we would just never have been able to think up, it became very apparent that Loom was going to be this like weird, like sort of like video messenger for the modern workplace. And that this was going to be a major rocket ship company, and that like we could either hop on or like it would take off by itself and like somebody else would do it. And we chose to hop on. And so I often tell people that there's like kind of two different types of founders. One are founders that know the world should be a certain place, and they relentlessly push their vision, right? They're like, we're building towards this. This is how things should be. And then there are founders that, maybe they go in that way, but like really they stumble upon something like transformational. And we were like squarely in that latter camp, like we squarely just like stumbled into this thing. We had built up a hypothesis, but this thing really took on a life of its own. And honestly, we kind of got absorbed into the Loom, like the Loomiverse, the Loom universe. Like it just like completely absorbed and encapsulated mine, Joe, Shahid, and everybody on the team, like all of our lives at that point.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that you guys stumble upon this amazing opportunity, but it also took a lot of hard work for you guys to build a company around it. So that 2 weeks when you guys were running out of money, what happened there? Did you end up raising money within 2 weeks?
It's a good, yeah, I guess that is a gap in the story. We basically what happened is we knew that because we had built the tool to record and upload at the same time, we knew that it was going to be generally, useful. And so me, Joe, and Shahid got together and were like, hey, let's just like unlock this thing and see what happens. And then what happened was it was like a 5-day really intense build sprint for me to unlock the extension. And then also speaking of Phil's, we went to Phil's in San Mateo, and I literally just put my laptop in front of people who were just working. And I was like, use this product. And all it was, I was like, give me your feedback, use this product. Because I couldn't wait to get like, funny enough, I couldn't wait to get user testing feedback. I was like, I need it now. And so, I had people click, the user experience was that there was a little button, you clicked it, it automatically pulled up your camera. There was no countdown. It was just like you were right, you started recording right away. You clicked it again and you got a link. And that was it. That was the entire user experience. There were no options. Like you couldn't change like cameras or microphones. You didn't have a choice about like camera only or screen only or screen and camera. It was just screen and camera, and that's it. And it was almost so smooth that people found it jarring is what I found. But like most people are like, oh, that's like really cool. It was just really positive, right? There were a few kinks that we had to work out. But we went through that phase. So we did a little bit of user testing by basically harassing people at Phil's. And then like we ended up launching it on Product Hunt, and we had already launched a couple of other of the user testing products on Product Hunt. So we kind of knew how this thing went. We knew we had to release, we had to get somebody who was like a big influencer maker to release it for us. We knew we had to do it at like 12 on the dot, and then start like, speaking of harassing our friends to like upvote it before everybody woke up on the East Coast. And so it did gain momentum, but honestly, it was also, it gained a lot more momentum than our other ideas because it just struck a chord, right? Like I think a lot of people were like, oh, this is like really interesting. I never really thought about my workflows with a very quick video, like one that is instantly available, because no one was really optimizing for that. They're like, why would you optimize for that? And so what happened was, when we launched on Product Hunt, we were actually, two of our first investors, Danielle and Michael Gibson, Daniel Stuckman, Michael Gibson from 1517, they were coming over to our place literally the next day to tell us, hey, like, we're not going to lead a giant check in your round for a user testing company. We'll give you $50,000 because we just feel bad, honestly, for you guys. Like, we think you've like pivoted a lot. We want to see how much more you can get out of it. And basically they came over and were like, we need to sit you down because we're not talking about a user testing platform anymore. And it was, at that point we had like over 1,000 users, and we showed both of them and we're like, we're probably going to go do this thing, which is very different and it's very weird. But like, do you want to get in on it? And Danielle was like, not only do we want to get in on it, we want to lead your round, and we want to give you $250,000. And so, that was a couple of days before July 4th, where I took my first vacation. And when I saw the money hit our bank account, I literally had a panic attack in the shower and fell on the floor, because I thought for sure we were going to go broke. And all of a sudden there was $200,000 in our bank account. And it was just like a lot to process all at once. Like, after all of this grinding, after all of this hard work, after like getting kicked down so many times, like, we finally had a product that was gaining traction. We had like a decent amount of money in our bank account, an investor leading around, and we knew that we were going to move up to the city to grow our operations. And I was like, it was just a lot at once. It was like night and day. And that's kind of like the gap of the story of, launching Loom, and kind of the whirlwind that honestly began, that energy that happened within that shortened period of time. I think the thing that's most amazing to me is that Loom has basically been that action-packed start. It's something I didn't realize was going to happen, but it's basically been that action-packed from that moment for like the next 4 years all the way up until now. And so it's just been like a wild roller coaster since then.
Yeah, that's such an interesting story. This story feels like a scene from the movies. Investor knock on your door to give you a huge check in the last minute. At this point, you figure out the product side of things, made some pivot. Can you tell us more about the business side of things? When did you guys turn the project into an actual company? In that 2 weeks, did you guys already pitch to all the investors? When did the users start paying for your product?
Yeah, so I would first start with like what my advice is. What my advice is like, work on 1 or 2 ships with your co-founders and then incorporate. So as soon as you know that these are people that you want to start a company with, then incorporate. There's no reason not to, especially with tools like Stripe Atlas. It's just so much easier to incorporate today than it was even back then. For us, we ended up incorporating like basically after the first iteration of like a landing page for user testing in 2015. Like October 2015. And we started taking in money for that user testing product. We ended up, the second half of your question of, were you raising? I think that for us, like, we knew we wanted to bootstrap, but we knew we also wanted to start building investor relations as soon as we knew that we were going to essentially leave our jobs and like focus on this full time. Because our outlook was to build a successful company, and we knew that we just didn't have enough money to keep going past a certain point. Like, we honestly didn't know that we had enough to stretch for like 6 months, but we thought like 4 months or so. And really what it came down to was starting with a list of VCs and people that we wanted to get in touch with, reaching out to those people, even when they weren't interested, because we were so early and it's like a user testing product. We kept these people updated over and over again in a newsletter. So we started building up our hypothesis, started showing traction, and started showing our ability to ship and think critically about our pivots. And we kept a bunch of people on an email chain up to date about our progress. And that proved to be really fruitful because VCs like trade in the game of information, right? And so if there's a VC who sees a group of people that are just like making really smart choices, pivoting, like working really hard and doing it endlessly, and with like a high degree of like a high caliber degree for product, for very early stage investors, they look at them, they're like, the team is like 99% of it. So we're willing to give you money. And so we hadn't really raised from an institutional investor like 15, 17 until that dramatic moment, which might be like a little less relatable to most people. I think it would be very unrelatable to most people, but you know, we got rejected so many times. Like we had basically been getting rejected steadily for not only on the product, but especially with VCs for like 5-6 months straight. Just like many people being like, like we'll give you these terms, and we're like, well, we want more. Like we know that we have something that's a little bit more valuable than that, and then they like pull out, or you know, thinking about taking like much bigger rounds from international investors who we didn't really know, and we're like, I don't really know what their angle is. Is this like smart money right now? All the way to like getting to the end of like certain early stage investor relations and rounds, and then getting rejected because, you know, I'll give you an example. I won't name names, but there was an investor who we were talking to who's really stoked about what we were thinking about doing in the user testing space. And we told him, yeah, you know, like this was like near the end, we've been iterating in this space for a while, but really also this video technology is like really interesting. And we're thinking maybe there's like an app or a recorder that we could go into, or like APIs. And they were like, hey, like, you know, I'm really into this like user testing stuff. Like, I'm sorry, I got to pull out. It seems like you don't have like a lot of structure, which like, if that investor is listening right now, I'm so sorry for like your miss out, because it ended up being like 100% the right call. Right. And so I think that's like another lesson, which is that even though you're entertaining all these investors early on, have like some backbone and structure and principles. And as long as you're building up that hypothesis, you and your co-founders know better than anybody.
The tricky part about the email list is you probably don't know if the receiver is going to send it to a competitor, right? What's your mentality on if an investor tell a portfolio company to create a similar feature in their company?
I think you assume that people will copy, right? Like you just assume that people are going to copy what you're doing. You know, like if there's something that's working in your product, they're going to copy it. And it's no one's responsibility other than your own to figure out how to make what you're doing inherently defensible. And so, you know, like maybe it's not a good idea. It probably wasn't a good idea for us early on to talk to a certain video competitor who ended up using the guise of them investing in our company as a way to get information, and then did like straight up just copy us, like pixel by pixel. Probably not a good idea to do that. You know, like we have a few different direct competitors, and I'm sure people who are like in the space would be able to glean it together, but we're doing well. We're doing, at least as of right now, knock on wood, you know, we keep executing, we keep humble, and we keep our heads down, but we're doing the best in the space of what, like async video. That can quickly change. But you know, like that's how we're doing relative to the other competitors. We're doing better than this competitor, but you know, also I think part of it is because we had a specific product vision. We had a specific hypothesis that we had built up over time about going horizontal, about hitting distribution really hard, about Loom being generally useful in many different contexts. And honestly, like even thinking back to it, where we thought Loom would like increase its usage, and like the different use cases, it blows my mind at how small we were thinking even back then to where we are today, which also tells you about like serendipity and market forces playing a role here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was up to us to have this vision, stick to it, and then to do our work to make what we were doing defensible. And I think early on, like one of the things that made us defensible was really making sure that that video was like instantly ready no matter what, and that it worked. And that recording technology, at least at the time and even till today, was extremely hard to get right, like very, very hard. So like even today, like you can come out with like a Chrome extension or an iOS app that does what Loom does. To get that to work across like native PC, native Mac, like extension in browser with no install, Android coming up, like is really hard. It's like exceptionally difficult because like anytime a new device comes out, anytime like, you know, your microphone gets updated, Loom's software stack will probably break in some way. And so like it's a really hard space to get into right now, but I'm a firm believer that what gets you here won't get you there. And if you're solely banking on a technological advancement, like you're in a bad place. I think Dropbox has shown us that like file storage and sharing is like commoditized at this point. It's not a super unique value prop. It's a really shaky business, and they're trying to aggressively compete in other areas, which is great. But I think they've like in many ways done it really late. And I don't want Loom to get into that situation. And I've had that mantra all the way from the beginning. And so it's really up to the founders to be taking a hard look at what makes them competitive. One of the number one things that will make you competitive is coming up with a hypothesis and a viewpoint on the market, sticking to it, and going really, really deep and focusing on that. It's not going to be from like hiding your ideas. I don't think, especially early on, where like you're just so much more agile than everybody else. That's not really the way to go. I think there is like some nuance there to say, obviously, if you know that this investor is like a huge investor in like one of your direct competitors, maybe don't disclose like all information. You know what I mean? Like there's some level of like have common sense and like do your due diligence, but also like don't let that get in the way of you like sharing what you're working on in order to garner new business and new business opportunities. I think that's like a terrible shame and a horrible way to operate, because you could be locking yourself out of like a meaningful relationship that actually changes the trajectory of your company. And, you know, where do you want to operate from? A place of fear or a place of optimism, because you're iterating off of a sturdy base and a sturdy set of hypotheses.
That's really well said. Loom is a technology company. How competitive is that space in general? Do you think your competitive advantage is how sophisticated the technology is, or do you think it's about the business or design side of things?
So in the context of where we started, when we started Loom, definitely very difficult. A lot of the technologies were very new, and getting them to be stable was very hard. In the context of right now, I think video is getting commoditized faster than any other technology out there. There's companies like Daily.co, Mux.com. They make like transcoding and serving live video streams easy, like as easy as possible, right? And I don't know if I'd buy that right now nobody could do what Loom does, like on the technology end. I think multiple people are doing it. I don't think they do it particularly well. I know why that is. It's because it's really hard to do it with as few bugs and as fast as we have done it. You have to invest in a significant amount of infrastructure right now. But I don't think that's going to hold up. Like I think that like right now, even we're constantly looking at new ways to innovate, and the way we've actually structured our recording technology is going to pave the path for another bout of innovation around another part of our product that I can't talk about right now. But like we're also just like far ahead of everybody else. The way that they would structure this recording platform, if they're only thinking about record and share, they're going to get left behind again, because I'm constantly pushing the team to like innovate and think about like the next layer. It's kind of like there's multiple different types of engineers. There's the, and this is honestly taken from our VPE, but there's like the gardeners who like to make sure that the interfaces and things look like really nice and pretty. And that is important work for many reasons. There's the plumbers, where it's like they just like to stick stuff together and like make it work. And then there's the stonemasons, and the stonemasons like lay the foundation for you to build cathedrals, right? And you want to think about your competitive advantage as being at first a plumber, but knowing that you're building a stonemason foundation. And so in many ways, that's how like I approach technology. That's what I would argue to anybody who's like looking for a technical co-founder and they're trying to like, understand, hey, like we think we might have a technological advantage here. Can you stick a bunch of stuff together, and then can you like invest in that to make it really hard? Where like, even if you can stick a bunch of stuff together, somebody else coming into the space, it's like all of the duct tape around that piping is really hard to replicate and just takes time. And for us, that was the recording infrastructure. I don't think that I don't pretend to fool myself that it's like defensible. I don't think any technology is defensible, really. Like I always think there's someone smarter out there than me. Like maybe there's some like serendipitous occasion of the right people meeting under the right context, and they just build something that's way better than Loom with like none of the team and all of the agileness, right? Like that's how we got here in the first place. And so, I think that like video right now, like if you're looking to try to build something that is specifically around live streaming defensible, you're going to be in for a hard time if you're not like a daily.co that's trying to like power other video experiences. For video messaging, I mean, I have firsthand experience here. I think it's going to be really hard to compete against Loom. Like we've done some like pretty difficult technical things that really require tens of millions of dollars and like just lots of time and like experience and focus. And so I would hope that the innovation people would be trying to look at within video, if it's on the technological, maybe it's in AI, if it's on, but hopefully it's more around like product than anything. It's like, what kind of product problems are you solving?
One thing that really impressive is you guys brought in high profile investors and really cool partnerships. Your customers, including Square, Uber, LinkedIn. How do you guys gain this kind of traction, and why did those companies or VC funds pick your platform versus your competitors?
So we created a product that was needed at the right time. By the right time, I mean like where we were growing very quickly. And then like obviously before the pandemic hit and our total addressable market size like literally quadrupled. And so right time was a huge factor in it. I think also though, like really we just built the best product, like both from a design standpoint, making sure that we kept simplicity top of mind, not trying to like over index on one, type of persona. Like Loom is not, for instance, a tool for marketers. Right? It's a tool for marketers, but Loom is not a marketing tool in and of itself. So we kept it horizontal, and that definitely helped the traction. But really, we just built a really good product like that. And I know that seems overly simplistic, but I think a lot of people, like when you're building products like Loom, that is incredibly important because people buy on emotion too. If you're asking like, how do you get investment opportunities with like KPCB and Sequoia, just build a really good product that solves a real problem. And then maybe you will have the traction. Maybe you'll have the traction to get investments from those people, but maybe you won't. And like, you have to try again. But like, if your product is not good, like nothing else really matters. And it's one of the reasons why, honestly, like I meet a lot of founders who super play like the performance marketing SEO game. And I'm just like fundamentally a different person. Like I look at people like that and I'm like, I'm so happy it's working out for you. But like, I have nothing to talk about because I'm a builder. Like at the end of the day, I'm a builder. And like, even my non-technical co-founders, they're builders, right? Like Joe is a product person. He's like, I'm a builder. Like I just want to build the best product. And we really have almost like a religious belief in that if you like hyper focus on that, people just want to buy the best product, but it has to be at the right time.
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Beside LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com. Click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.